Nothing? No? You're talking. I can see you're talking. I- Technology is great till it stops working. Ah, got it. Got it. Okay, so this is Tim McNeil from OSR. Just sorry for the delay here. Carrie's having some technical issues. She's actually going to be dialing in. She's dialing in right now. So again, Tim McNeil from OSR. Carrie is dialing in as we speak, and today we're going to talk about how to better manage sales people remotely, which we've found to be obviously extremely top of mind with everything going on during the COVID era that we're in currently.
I can hear you now. Can you hear me?
There it is. I can.
Ah, finally. Chaos. Chaos. How are you, Tim? Thank you for joining me today. Sorry for the chaos today. My webcam stopped working yesterday, and my microphone stopped working today. I hooked up to a completely different setup, and it still won't work. So apologies for keeping everyone waiting.
I've got tape on the side of I've got tape on my earpiece because my headset completely fell apart on me earlier. So
too many Zoom meetings. That's it. I'm done. No more. So let's get started. Thanks everyone for being patient today. Can somebody in the audience let us know that you can hear us? Just type in, yes, I can hear you. That would be great. And then let's get started today. So my name is Carrie Simpson. I'm the CEO of Managed Sales Pros. With me today is Tim McNeil, the Chief Operating Officer of Osprey Strategic Research, also known as OSR Manage. And Tim was gracious enough to agree to come online today and share a little bit about how they are managing remote sales teams for MSPs. So Osprey Strategic Research and Managed Sales Pros have known each other for a long time, probably, 6-7 years now. Yeah. And we compete in some areas, and in other areas we don't overlap at all. So one of the things that we wanted to talk about now with the new normal was the viability of hiring, managing, and training sales agents that may be not only not in your office, but in completely different states, which is a phenomenal thing to take advantage of if you live in a state where a sales development rep might cost $40,000 a year, and you could hire one in a state where the going rate is closer to $28,000 a year. Yeah. So a little bit of housekeeping before we get started. You can use the panel on the right to chat with us, ask us any questions that you have, and if the audio goes again, you can let us know that too. So today we're going to talk about hiring, training, and managing remote sales reps. I prepared some questions that I wanted to ask Tim before we started today.
Mm-hmm.
Whoops. There, that's as many slides as I put together today. So the first thing I wanted to talk about was early indicators that a remote sales rep isn't performing. I think one of the biggest hangups people have about managing remote teams is, how am I going to have the same level of control that I would have with a sales rep that's sitting right in our office? So what do you guys do to help managed service providers manage those sales teams that they might be able to replicate in their own organizations?
Yeah. So honestly, the service that we provide is essentially an outsourced sales manager, right? We've kind of identified, and I think most MSPs would. I'm not shifting the Earth's axis when I say that most MSP owners are good at training and managing sales or engineers, but not so good at doing the same with salespeople. So we've created a service where we do that for them. And with COVID happening since March, the timing of it has been kind of weird and worked in our favor in a way, because everybody's working from home. I mean, states are obviously going back and yada yada, but we had to figure it out really quick. And one of the two things that we do on a regular basis is we have daily huddles. I mean, literally every day. There is not a day that person doesn't get a touch point, and it's usually 15 to 30 minutes. Talk about what they did in the previous day, make them verbalize the numbers that they did, the calls that they did, decision makers, appointments, etc. And then we also actually use contact science. And contact science, although look, no CRM is perfect. Some of the strong things about contact science is their reporting and the ability to listen to calls. So we combination of morning huddles to make sure that they're being held accountable, and then we compare that to contact science reports, and we can tell how much time they've been on the phone, everything, how many dials they've made. We can tell real quick if somebody's maybe not being as honest as they should be, and we just coach to that every single day, right? So that's been extremely helpful for us.
So if you were a managed service provider who wasn't working with a company like OSR Manage, what would be their earliest indication that they may not have made a great hire? Like, how quickly are they going to be able to tell that, and how quickly can they fix it?
Yeah, so good, better, and different. That's kind of why we've found a little niche, right? I think where if the MSP owner has time, where they really need to focus is average talk time, average time on phone. So for instance, if you've got a rep who's making, let's just call it 100 dials in a day, just round number. If you've got a rep making 100 dials, but their talk time is 40 minutes, you got an issue. Now, one day, outlier, right? But if it's consistent and it's just ongoing, then that's definitely one indicator. Another one that we like to track, and we recommend everybody tracks, is Gatekeeper effectiveness score. And that's just, I mean, it is what it sounds like, right? It's how many calls do you make and how many times do you get past the Gatekeeper. So we like to see anywhere from a 5 to 8% average of, again, make 100 calls, 5 to 8 times, you should be getting past the Gatekeeper. That doesn't always mean that you're going to be getting right to a decision maker, but hopefully you are. And then the other thing that we really measure people by, and although the dials to appointments have changed over the years, I think, and Carrie, I mean, you could probably attest to it too. The one thing that actually has held true with us, at least, is the decision maker to appointment ratio. So if you're talking to 10 decision makers, in general, you should be getting one appointment, right? So talk time, Gatekeeper effectiveness score, decision maker to appointment ratio. Those are, if you can follow those three things on a daily basis, we found that to be kind of the foundation of just holding people accountable right out of the gate.
So one of the things that assumes is that the managed service provider is using, a best-in-class calling platform, right? Something that can pull those key performance indicators out. I had the opportunity to meet with, it's Bob, isn't it? Bob Howard?
Yes, Bob. Yep.
From Contact Science. I had a conversation with him a couple of days ago, and we had a little demo of the platform, and it seems pretty proficient, and we really like the idea that you could push data right into ConnectWise from it. So I can see why you guys adopted that. It's a neat solution. And then for the managed service providers that are listening right now, if you haven't adopted a technology like that, there are some lower tech ways that you can manage it, but they're going to be so labor intensive that you're going to spend all of your time pulling numbers and none of your time coaching your team. So the first step towards successful remote team management is having the right tools and then learning how to use them. And then, as Tim mentioned, you've really got to pay attention to the numbers on the back end. Like, don't listen to what people are saying, look at your numbers.
Yeah.
So next question.
Always back check.
Oh, sorry, go ahead, Tim.
No, so I just said always back check. Always take a look at the numbers. The numbers don't lie. Numbers don't lie. Yeah.
We found that as well. I mean, I'm not keen on the idea of going back to running a remote team. I really like having my team in the office. But that's only because having remote callers for us, the number of callers we have, doubles our management overhead. So while it might be cost effective to hire 1 or 2 callers remotely, once you start scaling up significantly, now you've got to put middle management in there to manage pulling those numbers, interpreting those numbers, analyzing those numbers, and presenting those numbers. So there are pros and cons to everything. And one of the things that I wanted to talk about today was technology or security concerns or challenges when you're running a remote sales team. So we moved our team home during the major COVID scare in Las Vegas, and we had to completely change how we managed our technology. How do you guys deal with things like security, and what technology changes would a managed service provider have to consider if they were going to hire somebody who was completely separate from their organization?
So, so from a security standpoint, I will say that we have relied very heavily on Teams. We communicate through Teams. We do really all of our internal calling through Teams. From that standpoint, we also utilize SharePoint. And the third thing that we use is a platform called 90.io, which, if for the EOS model people out there, seems to be catching wildfire. So it's actually a really good product. So we've got a combination of those 3 things to kind of keep it all within areas where people can see it, but also the security should be there, right? And then second question was, you had 2 questions in there. I already lost my train of thought.
No, I mean, I think we're the managed service providers, at least, are pretty fortunate in that they're going to understand technology better than most companies. So the risks that are inherent in sending somebody home or a BYOD device aren't going to be, I mean, you're going to understand how to protect them better than the average company would. So that may be less of a concern, but I mean, we had a couple, we got rid of email. Now, your reps might not be able to do that, but our reps don't actually interact with clients in any way. So every time someone requests an email at Managed Sales Pros, one person coordinates those emails. All of our callers are amazing on the phone. Not all of them are great spellers. And when we're protecting other people's brands, we really need to be mindful that everything that leaves looks polished and looks like something that the company would have sent out themselves. So we solved that problem by having one person run point on it, but we got rid of email for everyone. So our biggest concern was, if our employees are at home and they're not being as cognizant, or they're using their laptops that we've issued to them to watch videos or what have you in the evening, and they're just idly opening things, we didn't want that compromising our company. And I don't think we've missed it. We're not missing email. Teams has been fantastic.
Yeah, it's been awesome.
So super agree with you there.
And I will say, from the lead generation side, a lot of, so I don't know when you got away. I know we've kind of talked about that, Carrie, where you started getting away from everybody having the individual email. I can tell you from the lead gen side, for the people, the MSPs who are still making calls on, it's usually a two-part authentication just to get into the email. At least that's what we find. And then on our management side, you know, the salespeople that we manage on the management side, they actually work for our client, right? So if we work with ABC MSP in Nashville, Tennessee, we find a salesperson that works for ABC MSP in Nashville. So they would be ingrained into all their systems.
Yeah, so you're not running the same, you don't have the same challenges that we do there.
Yeah, a little different, it sounds like. I mean, you know, a little bit.
We had locked every, like before COVID, everything was locked down to IP address for us, right? So if once our callers left the building, they couldn't access anything, not a client email, not our CRM, nothing. Like at 3:30, everything gets shut down, you go home. So that was, I mean, we had just finished putting that into place when we had to move people home. And I've always found it interesting to see how our companies have approached the same problems really effectively and really differently.
Yeah, yeah. Yeah, your timing was good on that, by the way.
So performance plans, let's talk about creating, I mean, we call them PIPs. Other people have different terms for them. You guys you're a traction company, we're a traction company. So we're going to speak the same language when it comes to scorecard, which is how we determine good performance, bad performance. But if you are going to, and from the mind of an IT company has hired a sales rep, they are a virtual sales rep now, they're sitting in an office in another city, and the MSP is managing them. How do you coach somebody on performance when you're never face to face with them, and possibly you've never even met them?
So that's actually where Teams has been unbelievably helpful. We internally, I can just speak internally for what we do, and we recommend anybody we talk to, whether it's client, prospect, we have a morning huddle, like a company morning huddle in the morning, and then we have another huddle at 4:30 in the afternoon Eastern time. So everybody sees each other every day. We do all of our interviews by video conference now, whether it's Zoom, Teams, or again, usually Teams. And then as far as, you know, as far as the scorecard, you know, we that's where the huddles come into play. Our scorecard is based off 100 sales activity points per day, and we have a whole sales activity point system that we've just look, we give it to anybody, right? They don't have to be a client. If we talk to somebody and they're like, hey, we're interested in having that, it's not some confidential secret. It's a way for MSPs to help manage their salespeople. And it's as simple as you make a call, you get a point. Send an email, you get a point. Get a contract end date, get 5 points. Get an appointment, that's elevated, you know, that takes you off the phone for a bit, at least in our system, takes you off the phone for a bit, and it's a reward, so that's 15 points, right? And then we have a point system around basically everything. But again, we have found a combination of those two things to be really helpful. Like I can honestly say since COVID started, and this is going to sound bad, but I can honestly say since COVID started, I see my employees more because every time I talk to somebody, I don't even message anymore. I just call them, so I see them face to face. So it's been, if you can utilize that internally, that's going to be a huge first step, I think.
So just thinking this through before I ask my next question, you would have a scorecard for your own internal employees. Are you managing scorecards for your clients? So are your sales reps all on a scorecard that is a traction focused scorecard? Are you coaching them on behalf of the MSP? Does the MSP have to do the performance improvement plan? So let's say you've got a you've got a rep that's who was performing fantastic.
Mm-hmm.
And then slowly his performance has been dropping, and you need to put him on a performance improvement plan prior to terminating employment. Let's assume that we're not in an at-will state and we've got to do a little bit of work before we can terminate someone. Have you found that there is a way that is more effective than others to do this in a way that, one, doesn't lose that employee immediately?
Mm-hmm. So with that, we actually use so short answer is yes, we do manage everybody to scorecards, and we actually use 90.io for that. We use their score.
So, but the whole, like, all of your clients are on and 90, for those of you who aren't traction companies, 90 is a software platform that allows traction companies to host their daily, weekly, quarterly, and annual appointments, as well as track all of their rocks and other meaningful metrics. And we're just switching to that right now. We're switching from traction tools over to 90, and I can't wait. So yeah. I'm interested in hearing more about how you're doing that.
Yeah, so we have, so admittedly, we still do have we're just in the process of doing it. The way 90 works is, for those of you out there who use 90, it's their scorecard feature is actually pretty squared away, and you can, now it doesn't measure per day. So we have a scorecard, good, better, and different. Right now it's an Excel scorecard, which is soon to be Power BI, but for now it's an Excel spreadsheet where we track everybody's individual numbers every single day, and then at the end of the week we put it into 90.io, and then you can basically create companies or create groups within 90.io, and then we use that. We will invite our clients to our 90.io instance, make them an observer, and then they can see that weekly scorecard. And then we also, for the ones who want even more detailed than that, and they really want a breakdown of what every day looks like, we've got that Excel sheet that we fall back on, and we give them, like, literally every day what that person's done.
And Excel, I mean, if you're managing one person, one sales rep or two sales rep, Excel is fine.
Yeah.
There's nothing wrong with using Excel. I mean, use the tools that you have that are free until you get to the point where they don't work for you anymore. We ran as lean as possible for as long as possible, and I kind of miss the simplicity of those days. I just continue to add more things on the pile.
Yeah.
So, remote agents, in your opinion, MSP is going to hire a remote agent. Should they hire a 1099 or should they hire a W-2?
We've always been the mindset of W-2, but it's so for us it's more ignorance, right? We never the 1099 side for us, we didn't understand it, right? And I still don't fully understand it. I'm not going to sit here and say I'm the smartest guy in the world, because I'm not. We just always knew that if we kept a W-2 for tax reasons, we knew it'd be a lot cleaner. So that's what we've always done, and I know there's ways to do it 1099, and Carrie, I think you probably did it. I think you did for maybe a little while and probably did it very effectively, but it just wasn't. I always recommend W-2. It's a really long answer to say.
Yeah, our concern, like the reason we stopped doing 1099 was we didn't feel like we could honestly answer the IRS 20 questions.
Yeah.
In a way that wouldn't get us audited or wouldn't have, just wouldn't create challenges for us down the road. Yeah. We'd have employees, for example, who were 1099 who would then file for unemployment benefits. And then we'd have to unravel and untangle that. So one of the challenges, if you're going to hire in the same state, W-2 I think is the way to go. If you're going to hire in another state, a very clear contract, a 1099 agreement, is an option for you, simply because you don't have complete care and control over that person. They will be more or less running their own small business out of their own home. You're not providing them, if you don't provide their equipment and you don't provide their office, and they are allowed to dictate how they spend their days, you could effectively hire a 1099. And you can also, at that time, try out people for shorter periods of time without there being repercussions. So if you want to hire somebody on a 90-day contract on 1099 to see how they perform, that's totally legal when you're hiring in another state. So you have to, I mean, obviously we're not lawyers. We're just people who run call centers with different methodologies. But my biggest issue hiring 1099 came when we finally moved into our office in Las Vegas. And then we had people who wanted to stay 1099. And then we had people who wanted to convert to W-2. And we had to deal with, okay, well, what are the repercussions of keeping some people 1099? Is that even legal? And then we had the Nerf gun incident where one of our employees shot somebody else in the face with a Nerf gun, and they got hit in the eye, and there was a workman's compensation claim, and that's where the wheels just came off the bus for us with 1099. No. And like, we never hired another 1099 again. It was terrible, and it was expensive.
Good. So right there is why we never went to. It was just the unknown for us. It was the unknown for us. I know people do it, and right? I know. Yeah, well, I know people do it, and I know they do it very efficiently. I just, I don't know, we just never went down that road.
Yeah, I think if you're hiring somebody who's got sales experience, somebody who's worked independently from their own home before, and again, you know, we're hiring telemarketers who've never made a phone call before. You're hiring sales reps for managed service providers who are going to have a different level of professionalism.
Yeah.
So I would think that most of the time, a managed service provider isn't going to hire the same, you know, $12 to $15 an hour telemarketer that I would hire entry level. They're going to look for someone with a little more experience, especially if they're not going to be able to hands-on manage them day to day. And those people may be very well used to working on 1099, understand the tax obligations, understand the parameters that they can operate within. And so you may be able to leave that up to the employee. I think there are benefits and drawbacks to the employees that they can take advantage of. And if you explain them well, they may very well want to be a 1099 employee, right? If you can write off your internet, if you can write off your phone, if you can write off part of your mortgage, there's a lot of benefits to the caller for being a 1099. And then the W-2, of course, it's just a whole lot harder to get rid of somebody that you hired as an employee. So hopefully you make the right hire, you don't have to worry about that.
Yeah.
So you guys are a traction company, so you're going to be all about culture. We're all about culture now. How do you reinforce your company culture with your remote team members?
So probably gonna similar answer to what I was saying before with teams, and I feel like I've brought that up like 3 or 4 times already. But it really for us, and you know, especially when COVID started, that's when we started doing 2 huddles a day, just making sure that everybody saw each other. Because look, it was lonely for a while there. Depending on where we are, things are coming back to normal-ish. We also, every Friday, we do, internally, we do a happy hour with everybody at like 3:30 on Friday. It's just 3:30 to 4, you know, somewhere in there. It's just sit back, everybody's on video, everybody's talking, everybody's laughing. That's been like really awesome for us, actually, like really good. And I can tell you, we've on the management side of what we do, we've actually translated that to the management side too. We do hump day happy hours for all the salespeople that we manage. So every Wednesday, or not every Wednesday, I think it's like once a month, and it's going to be moving to once every other week. All the salespeople that we manage, we have a happy hour on Wednesday, and whoever wants to show up, they do. We do it at like 7 or 7:30 to be conscious of the West Coast, and just get a bunch of salespeople having a drink and hanging out. And so we've kind of recreated what we do internally for our service too, and it's been, I would say it's been helpful for both sides, and I would recommend anybody does that. It's just.
So are your sales reps that you're managing kind of talking, sharing best practices?
Oh yeah.
You know, engaged in talking about how they're winning in their markets?
Yes. Yep. So we've actually, so the salespeople that we're managing, we set it up in kind of almost a peer group format, from the standpoint that the huddles that I was referencing, they're group huddles, but we make sure that we make sure that there's no salespeople in the same territory, right? If we have clients in the same territory, they're in different peer groups, period. Different managers, different everything. So I would say that's been a really nice, that we did that almost by accident. We started these peer groups, and it literally caught fire because everybody was like, hey, what are you doing in California? Well, I'm doing this. Well, what are you doing in Calgary? Well, I'm doing this. What are you doing in Charlotte? I'm doing this. And everybody was coming at it from different angles because they were in different forms of lockdown. And it just kind of caught on, and we just kept on doing it. And it's been really, it's been kind of cool to see that evolve, actually.
So one of the things I've always loved about the MSP space or the channel in general is the willingness of people to share their knowledge, right? Like nobody wants other businesses to suffer, whether they're in your market or not, right? I think we all kind of rally around the entrepreneurs that are struggling. We've all been there. There's plenty of business for everyone. There's no need to kick anyone while they're down. So I think that's awesome that you've got a group of people who are so invested in the success of their peers.
Yeah, it's been, well, I mean, look, with a lot of MSPs, if they have a salesperson on staff, a lot of times they're the only salesperson. So they've got the sales mind, they're dealing with engineers all day, and it's just kind of nice to talk to other salespeople sometimes when that's who you are.
So I wonder how a smaller MSP with only one sales rep could, just get a little bit of that energy created for their sales rep, right? If you've only got one person, he's sitting in an office in Virginia and your office is in downtown Washington, and you're not going to bring that person into your office at any time, how would you connect them with other peers in a time like right now? There's no networking events. We're not going to our BNI groups. We're not going to anything.
From that standpoint, I mean, normally non-COVID, I would just say, networks, chambers, shake hands, kiss babies, but that's kind of not the world we're in at the moment. So that's a challenge. That is a challenge for sure. But what I would say is, if that MSP is in a peer group and they have a salesperson and it's the only salesperson, I would absolutely reach out to all the people in that peer group, assuming they're in one, or if they have a business coach, and just hook them up with other MSPs that have salespeople, and just have them talk. We found it to be just super valuable. Like, it's really been kind of cool to see.
I mean, niche specific peer groups aren't the only game in town. If you're in an EO group, for example, everybody in that group is going to have salespeople. There's no reason you can't connect each other, right? Like wonder what other options are available.
That's true. We get so focused on talking about MSP only, but there's all kinds of, there's EO, there's Vistage.
Do your clients have sales reps, right? This might be a really interesting way to engage with your clients and say, hey, we're trying to build this thing. Would your sales reps be interested in a virtual peer group that meets every Tuesday or every other Tuesday? It might be a way to really add value to your clients if you could create one that you now own and host every week.
Yeah. So as a part of our management service, we actually do that every Friday, where like everybody just kind of comes, and it's kind of like a training slash it's training slash everybody gets together. And that there again, that's just kind of, that's something that we almost stumbled into during COVID, just to get everybody, I was talking about the group huddles, and the group huddles, we try not to make them more than like 4 or 5 people per huddle. And then on Fridays, we do just like this large group conversation. And sometimes we bring people in to talk. Sometimes it's just, how you doing? And just let everybody go. How did the week go? What worked? What didn't work? Kind of go around the room, and it's been fun to see.
So let's talk about interviews. You're going to hire a remote agent, somebody you've never met before. What are the 3 questions you absolutely want to ask in a remote interview?
Okay, so The three questions that I would always ask, God, I could go in for a while on that. First, do disc profiles for everybody out there.
We got time.
No, we're strong proponents of interview to your core values, and also do a disc profile and do a separate interview specifically to their disc profile. So for us, it's kind of comes in stages, right? So one of the things that I always ask is, wherever you are now, or wherever you just left, or wherever you got laid off from, if I were to talk to your manager tomorrow, what's one good thing that they would say about you, and what's one thing that they would say you need improvement on, and just see what happens. Uh,
We asked that in an interview, and they were like, "Why did you leave your last job?" I was fired. Oh, why were you fired? I was always late for work.
yeah. Yep.
Come
Yep.
on, like just a
Yeah.
little,
Yeah. Be smarter.
a little more inventive, please.
Yeah. So that's one thing I always ask when you're looking for salespeople. One thing I always tell people is, and I'm jumping around a little bit, but I'll go more towards like the end of an interview. Sometimes to a awkward degree, I will ask a salesperson or somebody applying to a sales role if they have any more questions at the end of an interview. And if they don't follow, at some point, if they don't follow up with, well, yeah, what are the next steps? Then they're not a hunter, and they're not somebody you want. And
Nice.
it gets awkward. I mean, there have been times where, I'm not even
I'm writing
kidding,
this down.
I have asked that question 5 to 7 times within like a 10-minute period to wrap up an interview. If somebody doesn't look, an interview, they're selling themselves. It's the best that they're ever going to be as a sales rep ever. And if they can't sell themselves into the next interview, or the next step, you do not want them. So that's again jumping around. The other thing is, so I'd say less questions, but more. I I I do it more now. I make everybody go through their resume, and I like really go through their resume, and I will ask, okay, if your manager there, and I kind of default back to what I was saying before, what would they say about you? What did you do well there? What do you think you could have improved on there? Also always ask layered questions. Just layered questions, especially the farther down the interview process you go. That's very important.
So can you give us an example of like when I don't know what you mean by that. So when you say a
Yeah.
layered question,
So sales candidate, you know, tell me about it. Tell me about an experience you had with your last manager that you disagreed on, and let them talk. Okay. Uh, how did that make you feel? Let them go. It just always follow up with open-ended questions. Um, and how was it resolved? What was the outcome? What happened? Just not that, I mean, those just things like that. So you start with something somewhat basic, and then just ask them to play out the entire scene. Um, or you've historically, maybe you're sitting with a rep that has more shorter sales cycle experience. Um, ask questions to get them thinking about how they can transition what they've done into the MSP industry, which is obviously a longer sales cycle. So that's where just start simple, and just like add on, and kind of see where the breaking point is, if you will.
how long on average do your interviews last?
So phone screen is usually 30 minutes, and then we'll do two on sites, about an hour each ish. And then sometimes there is a third on site, which would be like a formal offer interview. Sometimes that's done over the phone. It just depends. That one kind of that flexes a little. That's a give and take, but the the three must-haves are with what we do, at least in our opinion, is the screening call. First interview is just a culture interview to find out, hey, can I see this person working for me? Do they fit into my culture? And then if they do, give them a DISC profile, see what comes back, pull questions out of the DISC profile, and then discuss that in the second on-site/virtual.
Now you guys work with Brett, is that correct? Am I?
So Brett is actually, so he's actually one of the moderators in the peer group that we're in.
Right.
So we
So
don't.
So I just wanted to like share kind of a neat thing that ConnectStrat did for us recently. So
Yeah.
Brett and Jameson work for the same consulting group now.
Yep.
And just for those of you listening, as we mentioned 100 times throughout this, we're both traction companies. We work with the same facilitator groups, and we just did a testing thing called the Colby A.
He was
Have
talking
you
about
heard
that
anything
last
about it
month.
yet?
He was talking about that last month. I don't know details. I
I
don't know
just did
details.
one, and it was the scariest, most accurate thing I have ever read about myself. It was unnerving. It was so bang on.
Really?
So our
He
whole
was
executive
just
team
talking
took
about that.
them.
Really?
So we met with Jana. If you have the opportunity to meet with Jana, it was really an interesting opportunity, and they said, as opposed to a DISC profile, which can change throughout your life, right? You might be a different DISC profile in your 20s than you are in your 40s. The Colby never changes. Like, it's ingrained to you. By the time you're 6 years old, this is the person you are, and the Colby is going to tell you how to interact with other people and show you ways that you can play to your strengths. And I think like we did DISC profiling. We did something called Smart Hire. I mean, we tried a bunch of things to see if we could profile, what does the perfect sales development rep look like? And honestly, the only thing I've ever seen is that the key or the common denominator through all the people that were successful at our company was that they were all broke and they all needed jobs. Like, that's the only thing that I could find that was the same. Like, we profiled everyone, and like they were constantly changing. Our best reps had nothing in common. It was so weird. And then we looked at this Colby thing, and it wasn't really about personality traits so much as how do you act? Like, what are your instincts like? It's so for anyone who's listening, it's called the Colby, KOLBE A test. And it is fascinating. So even if it's just for an interest sake, I could take a look at it. And ConnectStrat, which is the organization that both Tim and I work with for our group facilitation, is one of the companies that's focusing on it heavily right now. So a little plug for both Brett and Jameson there.
Yeah.
So what about timelines? We got about 10 minutes left. Sorry, I can only see my clock on my phone now. I had a terrible Teams meeting earlier trying to learn how to run our new payroll system too. So there's been lots of technology snafus today. So we found running a remote team to be harder than running an on-site team. Is there anything that you would say was a whole lot easier running a remote team versus a on-site team?
In a weird way, I think COVID has helped because it's forced people to be home and it's forced them to be out of their comfort zone, and it has made them adapt to what they weren't used to, right? So just like you had referenced before, I mean, we started around the same time. You were maybe 6 months before us. For the longest time, I fought having remote employees up until Rob, my business partner, moved to upstate New York from Connecticut. And then we weren't in the same place at the same time, 8 hours a day, 5 days a week. then that's when we started using Teams internally. And honestly, now we have a few employees in Connecticut, a few employees in New York, some employees in New Hampshire, one in Mississippi, and it is saving on rent, I can tell you that. And it really has an impact on what we do.
I don't even want to talk about it. We're going up to 11,000 square feet this year, thinking we're going to grow into it, no problem. No.
Yeah.
That is an albatross right now. Yeah. But on the other hand, it does allow us to social distance very well.
Yeah, I could picture that.
All right, so final question for you before I open it up for Q&A from attendees. What is the one thing that you would go back and rip and replace and do differently if you could right now if you could wave a magic wand, not mess up anything, no change management required, you could just go back and say, I wish we'd done this one thing differently?
It's a loaded question. Once upon a time, Rob and I thought that we had a great idea. We thought that we could be a marketing company, right? And we actually did it pretty well. We did some Google AdWords for some MSPs. We did some social media, some light SEO. If I could go back and change one thing, I would have not gone down that road. It just going back to the EOS model. It wasn't in our wheelhouse. We put a round peg in a square hole. Again, we did average to probably slightly above average, but that wasn't really good enough. We just wasn't what we thought it would be. We tried to be somebody that.
From a personnel standpoint, is there was there a thing that, like, I remember that time in our history because we tried to partner with you.
Yep.
Figuring that, like, hey, it'd be great to be able to work with a company that really understands lead generation and how marketing should tie into it. So I remember the dark days and the custom software development days. And I did not envy you that expense.
Yeah. So from a personnel standpoint, I think looking back, I wish we put in a leadership team a lot sooner than we did. I think that would have really helped. Again, Rob and I being two historic salespeople, we tend to squirrel off. We have very similar personalities. We're yin and yang in a lot of ways, but we're very similar in some ways. We did not hire to people that would contradict us, and then when we started doing that, that's when things started getting better for us, I would say.
So are you the Tracy or the Carrie?
I am more the integrator. Rob is more the visionary, right? So
you do all the work.
yeah. Although Rob's having a bit of a struggle. He's doing a lot more work right now than he's used to. So, but that's where we've got our yin and yang. Yeah, we've got our yin and yang, and it works for us. So.
All right. So I apologize if I just made everything go sideways by pushing that button, but I can't see the question panel unless I click this button. So does anyone have questions for Tim or myself at this point? We've got about 5 more minutes. I'm good for a few more minutes. I think we went a little bit longer than I had anticipated, just chit-chatting, and I think we could probably, much like 2 MSPs in a room, 2 lead gen companies, could go on and on about process and mistakes forever.
Yep. What to do and what not to do.
Although we stole that contract end date from you, it was like.
Yeah. You're not the only one. You're not the only one.
But I mean, if nobody's stealing your ideas suck. So that's how I like to think about it when someone new comes into the space.
Yeah, very true.
All right, so we have a couple of questions, and I'm just going to prioritize them by the ones that I want to hear the answers to most because we're running out of time. Tim, somebody asked, how do you price your services?
So for us, it's just a flat rate, whether it's on the lead gen side, which we really don't focus on anymore, admittedly, as far as bringing on new clients, that is. Um, um, it's flat rate on both sides, right? So on the management side, it can be anywhere from 25 to 2750 per month, and then there's a huge economies of scale with a second salesperson. Let's say you're an MSP that has two salespeople. Um, there's a really large economies of scale because they're doing the same huddles, they're doing the same sales training, and the price kind of incrementally goes down as you add salespeople. So that's been,
Okay.
we found that to be kind of a value
So
add.
certainly a less um, overwhelming investment than hiring a sales rep and a sales manager at the same time.
Yeah, yeah, yes, that's one of the other things that we saw too often, and I'm sure you've seen it, where hey, I got a great idea. I'm going to hire a sales manager to then hire a salesperson. Where don't bring on the full salary. It's just not worth it in most cases. In most cases.
All right, so next question. Somebody wanted to know whether or not so it's contact science.
Hmm.
Contact science flows into ConnectWise. So I think what they're asking is, does contact science integrate with ConnectWise? And it does, and it's one of the only tools I've seen that has a two-way integration. So a lot of tools will push information into ConnectWise, but ConnectWise won't allow them to pull information back out. And this is a two-way transfer. And I thought it was fantastic. So if you haven't already taken a look at contact science, I don't know that it would be perfect for everyone, but I think for smaller MSPs with a couple of sales reps who aren't needing the very intensive and very expensive HubSpot or Salesforce marketing attachment, or not attachments. So HubSpot, for example, has a free CRM, which is pretty fantastic and pretty easy to use. But then the marketing piece is what kind of cuts you down there, whereas contact science has one integrated. Yeah. And you know way more about that. I've seen a demo, and you guys have been using it for years. So
Yeah,
but yeah, the answer to that is yes.
Yeah, and that's a big reason why we went to it, actually, because of what it integrates into. It's ConnectWise, Autotask, Infusionsoft, HubSpot, Salesforce, not Dynamics, so it does not integrate with Microsoft, but or Kaseya doesn't integrate there yet. But I know it's on their roadmap. So, but that's
weirdly enough, we did a survey, and about 100 MSPs answered the survey, and I wanted to know what they were using for CRM. I wanted to find out, were people using just their PSA, or were they using a PSA and a CRM? And there were very few people using the larger tools. Not a lot of MSPs are looking at Salesforce or HubSpot anymore. They've moved on to either niche-specific solutions or the less expensive solutions like Zoho. Contact science, a couple of people were using. So it's interesting to see the market changing a little bit, because everybody was using Salesforce when we started our business.
Yeah.
And everyone was like, "Do you use Salesforce?" And we're like, "Hell no, I'm not paying $180 a seat."
Yeah.
But it looks like we're at 6:00. Tim, have you got a couple more minutes? Do you mind sticking around for a bit?
Yeah, for a couple minutes, I can.
I got a couple more questions.
Okay.
Actually, this one we answered a little bit earlier. What do I need to consider if I'm going to hire a sales rep in another state? And to that, I would say I would consider talking to an employment lawyer.
Yeah.
Just to make sure that you're not going to have to run a multi-state payroll, for example, which is something we never wanted to do.
Yep.
And last question, what phone system do you recommend? I think Contact has one built in, yeah?
They do. It's called FluentStream, and it is pretty good. you just got to make sure you're on the right server, right? So we've had some issues with drop calls in the past, but they are pretty good about when that happened. They were very good about moving us to get the the performance that we needed. We have found that it actually, with the integration and because it's click to dial, it's actually super efficient, and it records every single call for the states that you can. Records every call. It's got a beep in the background for the states out there where you need the beep to supersede asking or telling people that it's being recorded. So there's some really strong benefits to it. I mean, I can tell you that we've found it really effective in just like spot coaching, spot managing people, where we can listen. We know you can see how long the calls are, click on it, you can hear what both sides are saying, and then we coach to it. So that it's a pretty good product.
So Tim brings up a really good point for those of you that are considering hiring in another state. Make sure you understand the legal ramifications of recording
Yes.
calls, not just from the state that you are located in, but the state that your caller is located in. So there are one-party recording states and two-party recording states, and there are certain circumstances under which you can record your sales calls.
Mm-hmm.
But there are very few circumstances under which you can share them with external people. So for training purposes, you are allowed to record calls. Mm-hmm. But for example, recording calls and then sending them to a client for us is a big no-no. We mm-hmm. can't do that.
Yeah.
So we get around that by transcribing them. So
yeah,
if we have a problem,
I remember when you started doing that.
Our client would like to listen to the call. There are some states that we can't allow that for, and in those cases, mm-hmm. we just have a company go in and transcribe 10 calls, right? We just have them log into our system, mm-hmm. type everything out, and then we can send the transcription of the call. So there are definitely ways that you can still, have some quality control without recordings, but that's something you really need to take a look at. And then the next question was, would we need to change our phone system to accommodate having Osprey manage the sales team?
Look, one of our core values is don't be a donkey. So if you're married to it, then no, we're not going to make you change it, right? But what I would say is we have found it incredibly efficient to have FluentStream, a combination of FluentStream and Contact Science, just because of the immediacy of being able to do the click to dial, and also on the back end coach and have it all in one system. It's whenever a report is run or a report's generated, you can actually click on each individual call on the report and listen to it that way. So it's not required, but it is. It's highly recommended.
Would you not run your sales independently of the rest of your organization? If you wanted to hire OSR Manage and you didn't want to change phone systems for your mm-hmm. business, you can have a seat of Contact Science integrated with mm-hmm. a seat of the phone system.
Totally.
And you don't need to integrate it with the rest of your business. You could just create that standalone unit for the sales rep that you don't have to manage day-to-day anyway. So, Tim's managing them. You really don't have to worry about whether or not your phone system is going to integrate with, that's why you're hiring him, so that you don't have to listen to those calls. So you don't have to audit that caller. That's his job now.
And we do, look, we definitely have clients that they're just like, we use this is what we want to use, and we will not stop somebody from doing that. We do ask that we have a login so that we can get to know the system and make sure that we the important thing for us is the ability to be able to listen to the calls. So as long as we can do that, it's fine. We can make that work, definitely.
So I've popped up Tim's contact information here. So it sounds like you've got we're out of time, and it looks like you've got a few more questions you'd like to ask him. So you can reach Tim at tmcneil@osrmanage.com. And hopefully you guys can find an arrangement that works for you and you can get that sales rep up and productive. So Tim, thank you so much for joining me today. It's always a pleasure to talk to you. I know we get to talk offline every once in a while, but COVID had us all running around like crazy, and it's been a real pleasure to hear about what you guys are doing and how both of our companies are changing to meet the new needs of the market. And I'm, of course, always a big fan of yours and of Rob's, so please give him my best. Thank you, everyone, for joining us today. And if you have any more questions about sales lead generation, you're welcome to contact me at hello@managedsalespros.com or tim@tmcneil@osrmanage.com. I hope you'll join me in 2 weeks when I'll be hosting CJ Arlotta, who is a journalist specializing in the technology industry. He's going to teach us how to write press releases that get published. So thanks, everyone, and have a great evening.
Thanks for having me.
Let's see if I can figure out how to turn this off now. I got this. I can totally do this.
Wait.
Don't tell anyone I sell technology, okay?
Yeah, no kidding, right? Well, I couldn't tell.